And I'll send it back over to Sam now in the war room.
And if there is a second wave, it may very well read "Good night, Baghdad," the next headline. We're going to head off to Qatar right now. That's where Command Central is located. That's where we find MSNBC's David Shuester to bring us up to date. 37 minutes past the hour right now on this Thursday morning here in the States.
Military officials had talked about in the past that it had actually been somewhat controversial, and that is this idea that the war would begin with what is known as a rolling start, and that is you'd have several different components, various sequences. You might have attacks on Baghdad, as we had last night. There might be the beginning of ground operations, special forces, all moving at a slightly different clip. One of the things that military officials had been very concerned about is this very time that that they find themselves in right now, and that is the first shot has been fired. There's some concern about what kind of response Saddam might have, either by trying to fire Scud missiles at Israel or by trying to target Scuds on some of those U.S. troops and British troops that are concentrated in Kuwait. Remember, you have 270,000 troops that are there. There has been apparently, based on some of the targeting information, strong suggestions that part of this initial wave, in addition to going after the Iraqi military leadership and political leadership in Baghdad, that there was also an attempt to try to safeguard those troops that are in Kuwait. And to that end, you've heard Carl Rochelle talk about some of the reports that perhaps the special forces, special operations are already operating in southern and western Iraq. When you look at the target list that our MSNBC experts and analysts have been able to come up with, you've got airfields in southwestern Iraq, radar communication systems. These would go along with the idea that one of the primary concerns, of course, for special forces and special ops is to try to get the weapons of mass destruction while the conflict is in its early stages and before Saddam can perhaps put them on a Scud missile and fire them at the troops that are concentrated to the south. So that's the one component. The other component, of course, is something that we've been talking about all night, and that is this intelligence information that was developed that led to the attack on what they thought was Saddam Hussein. It's still not clear, and we're now at 11:38 in the morning here in Qatar. It's still not clear how that intelligence information was developed, whether it was a human intelligence, electronic intelligence. It's worth pointing out that the coalition has various aircraft that have been circling around Baghdad for several weeks that can actually pick up radio transmissions and cell phone calls. There's also been some talk about their ability to break into the actual phone line circuits. In addition, there's been some talk of perhaps the CIA infiltrating Baghdad and having human intelligence there. That would be the sort of thing that they did not have 12 years ago during the Persian Gulf War. The controversy with this description of the rolling start is that there have been some retired generals who have suggested that the model that should have been followed, that should be followed, is overwhelming force from the beginning, overwhelm the enemy and try to win the war that way. And the idea that when you start with sort of a stutter step, when you start with a few isolated attacks in Baghdad, when you have your troops still behind the border, still in Kuwait, that you leave yourself vulnerable. By all accounts, at this stage, there hasn't been much of an Iraqi response, if any, at least none reported. And so at this stage, it would seem that military commanders here at CENTCOM would be fairly pleased, although, of course, if they were trying to get Saddam Hussein and they did not get him, that, of course, would be the first failure. But in any case, no briefing scheduled here at CENTCOM. You can expect that the war, of course, would likely pick up when it becomes dark again over Iraq, which is in about another 7 or 8 hours. That is the time when U.S. forces traditionally feel that they have the greatest advantage, and I'm sure that's the time when you'd see more information start to come out. Sam?
NBC's David Shuester live for us in Qatar at Command Central. Thanks very much.